I'm Nikki Ansons from Coldwell Banker Ackley Realty, and I'm here this morning with the title attorney that I always use, Lew Oliver from Oliver Title Law. This morning we're going to talk a little bit about title insurance, why you need a good title company, various seller costs that you might incur when you're selling your home here with me in Central Florida. So thank you for joining us, Lew.
It was my pleasure.
So Lew, tell us a little bit of the difference between why we use title companies here in Florida and the difference perhaps in the United Kingdom where people only use a solicitor or attorneys.
Very good question. So the United States is actually, I think, the only country in the world that has a class of businesses called title companies. And in the rest of the world, including the UK, property transactions must be handled by attorneys. There's no option to go to a title company. The US is a little different. In 15 states, it works like the rest of the world. There's only lawyers. There's no such thing as title companies. But in most of the country, including Florida, where you and I work, title companies compete with law firms. So you have a choice as a realtor or as a seller. Do I use a title company or do I use a law firm? The basic services are the same. Our job is to hold deposits from buyers so they know their money is safe. Our job is to research the title to the property to make sure that the seller selling the property really owns the property, and therefore the buyer is really going to buy the property and has good title to it. And then finally, we handle all the logistics details. So we receive the money in from the buyers and from the buyers' banks. We prepare and collect and get all the documents executed so they can be recorded on the public record so you have a record of ownership once the transaction is over with. The difference between using a title company and an attorney is really like an extra insurance policy. So if anything goes wrong, or if you have questions about contracts, or you need to change the contract at some point, something comes up, you've got to address a repair issue, you've got to address a dispute, you have a title problem perhaps that requires legal intervention, maybe going to court, drafting documents and the like. It's much easier and quicker to get that done when you're represented by an attorney as opposed to a title company, because you don't have to go track down a lawyer someplace else. And in the US, probably as in the UK, sometimes it's not easy to find attorneys when you need one, especially if you need one quickly, which is why it's a good idea to start the transaction with an attorney. And that way, if the need arises, you don't have to go looking. You're at the other end of a telephone call and you can reach us at pretty much any time. And our firm is a little unusual in that myself and my main staff people are typically available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Excellent.
I've certainly called you out of hours in the past over
Sure.
the years, and so I've always really appreciated that you do that for me and my clients. So.
Absolutely. And I want to point out that it's a good point. We're also available to the client. So if they need to speak to somebody for reassurance, they've got a problem, an emergency arises, or just a question that's bothering them, they know that they don't have to wait till Monday, at 9 o'clock in the morning to get an answer. If it's really important, we'll get back to them right away or answer the phone immediately.
So Lew, tell us a little bit about your team here, because one of the things that my clients always really appreciate is the fact that we work as a tight-knit little team, and I have Janet and Amanda, and we're like the A-team. So tell us a little bit about why you do it that way.
You have to have continuity. You have to have the same people working time and time again. We're fortunate here at Oliver Title Law. I have a large staff, and so I can assign staff members to realtor clients and to other clients who will be their staff people forever. Every single transaction, they know each other, they know what their strengths and weaknesses are, they know when they're available, they know how they work, and you can relate that information to your clients, so your clients are dealing with the same people as well. They're not picking up a phone and going, all right, I don't know who to talk to today, who's it going to be, it might be a different person, and they get to know the people up front. It makes it a much smoother process for everybody involved. It also makes it easier for me, because I know exactly who to talk to in my office if a problem arises or if I need to ask a question about a file. All I have to say is which realtor, which client, which bank, and I immediately know who the team is going to be. And it's great for everybody involved. Your team in particular, Janet and Amanda, are terrific. They've been doing this for a really, really long period of time. And the good news is it's not just one person, it's two. So if Janet's at lunch, Amanda's usually available and vice versa. And if neither of them are available, we'll track them down and get an answer, and they'll get back to you as well.
Excellent. So some of the things that come up, Lew, when we're talking about the costs incurred for selling your home
Sure.
are different from here to in the United Kingdom. we have things called stamp duty at home. Here you and I refer to them as documentary stamps.
Correct.
So perhaps we could talk a little bit about the kind of cost that a seller will incur and the reason for them, why we have them.
Documentary stamp taxes that you're talking about are the transfer taxes. So anytime you transfer either real property or personal property or income or just about anything else, of course the government gets its little slice of the action. So we just have a different term of art for it here. The documentary stamp tax, only 7/10 of 1% of the sales price, which is fairly modest by national and international standards. The reason for the customs, by the way, has to do with how properties are priced. So the assumption is when you look at a property value online, when you go to one of the websites to try to figure out what a property is worth, that valuation by appraisers and others is dependent upon what assumptions you make about who is paying which costs. So it's important to know what those assumptions are. In our part of Florida, interestingly enough, it is customary for the sellers to pay for title insurance for the new buyers. In our part of Florida, the two largest costs, other than real estate transaction costs, are the documentary stamp taxes on the deed, 7/10 of 1%, not a ton of money, and then the title insurance, which is usually about a little over a half of 1% of the sales price of the property. So those two items together, maybe with all the other fees associated with it, 1.2, 1.4, maybe 1.5% of the sales price.
Okay, and just explain to us a little bit about what title insurance is and why is it important?
The easiest way to put it is you have to make sure that the people selling the property really have the right to sell, that they really own the property.
Yeah.
And you can't just assume that. You wouldn't want to buy something from somebody who just showed up in your house and said, well, I own that house next door, here, sign a document for me and give me $500,000 and I'll give you the house. Yeah. You're like, how do I know you own the house? So somebody has to go double check. And not only to make sure that they own it, but are there liens on it? Is there a mortgage? Is there a lawsuit? Have they done construction work? Do the construction workers and the general contractors have a lien on the property because perhaps the owner replaced the roof but didn't pay the roofers? So under Florida law, as in most places, probably in the UK as well, the people who do construction work on your property are allowed to place a lien on it to make sure that they get paid. So part of the work that we do as a title company is to research the background. We send people to the courthouse. Most of the searches are done typically by the way, from overseas. Yeah. They're not even done in the United States. Somebody goes on a computer, checks all the records, and verifies that the individual selling the property owns it free and clear. And if they don't owe it free and clear, is there a mortgage? Fine. My job is to find out how much it costs to pay off the mortgage so that when the property is transferred to the buyer, the property is free and clear of all the liens that may have occurred during the time when the seller owned the property. And then we do the same thing for the buyer. Often the buyer is placing a lien on the property. If they're taking out a mortgage, they're going to have their own lien that goes onto the property. Yeah. And the mortgage company wants to make sure that that lien is enforceable against the property if the buyers don't pay for their mortgage. So part of our job is to make sure that paperwork is done correctly as well.
So tell us a little bit about what escrow is and why it's important.
Well, it's a deposit. It's an indication that the buyer is willing to put some skin in the game, as we would say in the United States, that they're willing to put something at risk. And also it's a demonstration that they have at least a little bit of money so that you know when it comes time for closing that it's likelier that they're going to be able to purchase the home because they have to come up with more money for the closing. Sometimes realtors call it an earnest money deposit. There's various terms of art. It doesn't really matter which word you choose, take your pick. Our job is to hold the money in an escrow account to make sure that it's safe. And if the buyer defaults and doesn't proceed with the purchase of the property and they haven't withdrawn from the contract early enough during the inspection period or because their loan was rejected, then at least the sellers know that their compensation for keeping the house off the market is that they might be entitled to claim that deposit.
As a title attorney, what would you say is good advice for a seller? You know, what's something to always bear in mind when you're selling a home, maybe from overseas?
Well, first you have to hire the right professionals. I'm a real estate attorney in Florida. I wouldn't dream of buying a home in Montana or California or New York without hiring a very competent local realtor and a very competent local attorney. You have to know the local circumstances. So the first point of advice is get somebody who understands the local territory. And that means a really great realtor like Nikki and a really great title company or attorney like Oliver Title Law.
Well, thank you so much, Lew. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, and we've really enjoyed it. It's always good talking to Lew. If you ever need title advice and you need the services of a good title attorney, then please reach out and contact Lew directly. And of course, if you want to speak to me about selling or buying real estate in Central Florida, then please reach out to me.